Hello and welcome to Monetary Mentors, Monetary Monastery, our budget-focused Magic the Gathering podcast. I am Sam, your host, and joining me as always is my brother JP. Say hello to the good people, JP.
Hello, good people. It's nice to be here.
Always is. So we are super excited to have this episode. At least I am. I always love preview episodes, but I'm particularly excited for this one because I've been hyped for this set for months since they announced it, maybe a full year, given my long standing love of Redwall, and I know that's in you too somewhere, JP.
Yeah, we
Um,
did grow up together. It had like half the wall was filled with Redwall books at some point, so it was a
a
big deal for
Redwall
both of us.
indeed, yes, but
Yeah.
um, so this set is not Redwall, but it just has that feeling to it. So it's a new Magic set, and it's particularly nostalgic and cool for us. So just generally, do you have any impressions of this set so far?
Well, it's funny you were hyped. I think a lot of appreciating something is managing your expectations. So my expectations were sky high for this because deep down, what I really think I wanted was a Boros Martin the Warrior equipment mouse commander. It's what I yearned for, and they gave us, the generic version. I don't know why we couldn't have gotten the licensing for Redwall,
Give
but
it time. Give it time. They'll have everything universes
it's
beyond
fine. No,
before we know it.
it's fine. I do have just some more broad statements about the set. Is it's really focused on like 10 different tribes. It's kind of very limited driven, where a lot of sets aren't, where they have just kind of so many typal synergies, and you can see kind of what decks are they're trying to make work.
Mm-hmm.
Like the synergies are all very like all the bats, you lose life, you gain something. All the mice are kind of like heroic based. The lizards are like chip damage, and the
The frogs
otters
bounce. Yeah,
are
yeah. They all have
frogs
their
are
theme.
bouncing. Yeah, but I don't know. They always kind of feel samey because they're all kind of like low to the ground creatures. Um,
Yeah, I
so
agree. Having to do service to 10 types of creatures kind of didn't leave them a ton of room to do other things in the set. But that being said, there are still a bunch of cards that I really like. Some because of how they work with the other cards of their type, some because of their generic applications. So we're going to go through a list and talk about some of those. As always with these episodes, we're going to stay away from the cards everyone's talking about. We're going to focus on cheap cards, cards that we think can punch above their weight class, that can be key uncommons in decks that you can craft on Arena without having to drain your rare wild cards, and highlight like neat. I have a particular uncommon build around that I'm excited to talk about. Not
okay,
as a
yeah. Hopefully we
competitive,
can.
gonna break the meta deck, but I just think it's kind of sweet. So we will focus on cards that are not going to win the Pro Tour, but are also not going to bankrupt you for having to buy them.
It will win the Pro Tour in your heart.
Exactly, exactly. All right, so the first card to talk about is Heartfire Hero. It's a 1 red mana for a Mouse Soldier. It's a 1/1. When it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent and has Valiant, so when it becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So I am a longtime Cacophony Scamp deck lover. This just swaps into that deck for the Fireblade Charger as a improvement. It doesn't deal damage to creatures when it dies, but it's just a better card. You throw a Monstrous Rage on this, it's a 3/3 trample forever after that. That when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to your opponents. So I've been loving this card. What have you thought about it?
Yeah, so cat, honesty in all things. We've actually been able to play with this set for about a day now on Arena, just because of the timing of when we're recording this podcast. And I have ran into this uh, probably more than any of the new cards, just because people are doing the traditional spam of mono red whenever a new set comes out. And I think this card is if they're putting a monstrous rage on this 1/1, I'm like pretty okay with that. Like there's so much spot removal, there's so many ways to like stop, the monstrous rage from even resolving. Um, there's I've just seen this, and I've never like comparing the impact this has on a game to something like Kumano Fakes' Kakazan, which just got rotated out. I think mono red actually got a big L here. It might be good in the cacophony scamp decks, which are kind of like the, I know you love it, but it's kind of a like the tier two way to play the deck. So maybe it'll be good there. Maybe I just happen to be playing decks with really good removal suites, and I haven't worried about it. But I'm not too impressed with how this card played out.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a generic mono red powerhouse, but it is certainly a. If you're trying to play pump spells on your creatures and then fling them at your opponents, it is definitely
Yeah,
an
people
upgrade
are
in that
people are
deck.
playing it in like the mono red deck like pretty consistently, and it hasn't really done what I think they're hoping for.
Well, let's talk about another one red drop. This is Hired
Sure.
Claw, one red mana. It's a 1/2 lizard. Whenever you attack with one or more lizards, which includes itself, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. And you can pay 1 in a red to put a +1/+1 counter on Hired Claw. Activate only if an opponent lost life this turn and only once each turn. So this card, to me, seems like Knight of the Even Legion, but like way better because if you play this on turn one, attack on turn two, put a counter on it, that's 3 damage on turn two, 4 damage on turn three, and 5 damage on turn four, which is 12 damage by turn four from one card. And if you're playing a low to the ground red deck, you have a mana open on turn three and 2 mana open on turn four while you do that. And if it's not optimal to sink that much mana into this, then you don't have to. So this just feels like a one drop that can snowball the game by itself. Um, do you have any thoughts on Hired Claw?
Yeah, it's basically just like if you're going first, it's a good card, and if you're not going first, it's not a good card. That's my opinion on it. Like it's also kind of weird when you're playing like, do you want to sink all this investment into one card and pressure with it if you're playing against control, but also like I don't know. It's I think it's good if you're going first.
Yeah, and I think if they don't have like the creature that can sandbag it, even if you're going second, it can potentially do a lot. It's just I think the bar for what a 1 mana creature has to do isn't that high, and this does an awful lot for 1 mana. So I like this card a lot.
Yeah, it can pressure on its own. That's pretty useful.
Another card I want to talk about is Bushy Bodyguard. So this is 1 and a green for a Squirrel Warrior. It's a 2/1. When it enters, you may forage. If you do, put 2+1/+1 counters on it and has Offspring too. So this is, sometimes I just look at a card and I'm like, wow, this is 2024 Magic. Because this is an uncommon 2 drop that you can invest no additional mana into and it can enter as a 4/3, right? Because foraging means sacrificing a food token or exiling 3 cards from your graveyard. So this isn't really an aggressive card, even though it's big and cheap, because you're unlikely to have the 3 cards in your graveyard that you need when you play this on turn two. But as a turn four play that's either 2 mana, so you have 2 mana for something else like a removal spell that's a 4/3, or you pay the offspring cost. This is potentially, if you have 6 cards in your graveyard or some food lying around, this is like a 4 mana 4/3 and a 3/3.
Yeah, but
Um,
does it draw you a card?
it
I don't
it
know.
puts a 3/3 into play. That's better than a
All
card.
right, all right. But does the 3/3 draw you a card? I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. Like you said, it kind of your initial impression is that it's going to be like a tempo aggro card, but foraging, which is a new mechanic, is kind of difficult to do unless, and I'm sure I mean, there are one drop create food tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like it's just to me, it's in an awkward space of where you're building around it. It is definitely strong, but the deck is just kind of weird to me, just conceptualizing what the deck would be.
Right. So let me put it this way. So when you're building mid-range decks on a budget, I think that's the hardest type of deck to build on a budget because all the cards that are amazing standalone threat cards, which is like the cornerstone of mid-range decks,
Yeah.
are really expensive because that's just the type of card that gets expensive. This card, if I was building a budget mid-range deck, would be like the Tarmogoyf replacement. You know what I mean? Not that that's like the most expensive
Bushy
card ever.
Bodyguard is spot is Tarmogoyf. You've heard it here, folks.
I
You heard
would
it
play it
here.
over Tarmogoyf in those cases if we're being
It's a
honest.
better Tarmogoyf. All right.
But it's a
All right.
very efficient beater. Like even if it just has to be a 2 mana 4/3.
I mean that is hard to do. I think it to be a 2 mana 4/3.
If you play a couple food synergies in your deck and or you're just playing your fatal pushes or your cut downs or your I don't think it's that hard to get 3 cards in your graveyard.
Yeah, I think a 4/3 for 2 mana is amazing on turn two and is like utterly pedestrian on turn five. That's all.
Anyway, I'm just
Yeah, we'll
impressed with
see.
this
We'll see.
as a
Yeah,
budget mid range. So.
yeah, sure.
Another wild card for 2 mana is Emberheart Challenger. So this is a 2 mana red mouse warrior. It's a 2/2 with haste and prowess, and is valiant. So whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, exile the top card of your library until end of turn. You may play that card. Um, boy, that's a lot. This is an aggressive card,
Yeah,
but also a card advantage engine at the same time
yeah,
for really no additional cost because you're going to be playing this in like your classic monstrous rage deck, and just every time you do that aggressive thing you already want to be doing, you're getting access to another card for the rest of the turn. Like this
yeah.
card
It's like
is
I
wild.
think Wizards has like a sick fascination with like the classic 2 mana red 2/2 with haste, and they're just gonna keep adding text onto it until they finally break it. You know, we saw Slick Shot; it's been a really good card. Now we have another 2-drop 2/2 haste with prowess, and it's just they're committed to the archetype. I think.
Yeah, like it a lot. Another card that I like as maybe one of my favorite cards in the set is Essence Channeler. So this is a 2 mana white bat cleric. It's a 2/1.
Hmm.
As long as you've lost life this turn, Essence Channeler has flying and vigilance. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Essence Channeler, and when it dies, put its counters on target creature you control. So this is as long as you can kind of lose life when you want on your turn, which is very easy to do with pain lands
Yeah, Cave
and
of Koilos for
yeah,
sure.
Cave of Koilos. Like put 4 of them in the deck with this one.
Yep.
Um, but also like Thran Portal is still around. There are ways to do it. This is a flying vigilant Ajani's Pride Mate that also when it dies gives you value. So Ajani's Pride Mate always had 2 problems. Like besides it's like a total noob trap card, and its 2 problems were that it could be chump blocked no matter how big you got it, and it just died and did nothing no matter how big you got it. This card solves literally both of those problems. Like Ajani's Pride Mate was not hard to make an 8/8, right? In those
No,
decks.
no, definitely not.
But you could just Fatal Push it, you could just Doomblade it, whatever. Or you could just chum block it with tokens and not have to worry about it as an actual threat. This has flying and vigilance, which you can actually surprise your opponent with. If they have flying creatures and this is not flying, if you can make yourself lose life on their like when they're attacking, this then has flying.
Yeah, that's neat. That's neat.
Um, Flying and vigilance, so it's attacking and blocking. Which, and then when they Doomblade it, if you made it an 8/8, you just give those 6 or 7 counters to another creature that they
Lifelinker. Yeah,
then
you got
have
one
to.
mana lifelinker. Now it's bigger problem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love this card, and I am a big Ajani's Pride Mate hater. I do not like that card, but I love this card.
yeah. I love a Johnny's Pride Mate. I love the cleric that we just lost that does a similar thing. And I actually opened like 5 or 6 packs, and I got 2 Essence Channelers. So I will be playing with this card, and I'm excited for it.
Fantastic. We also have Fireglass Mentor, which is kind of the signpost uncommon for lizards. It's red and a black for a lizard warlock. It's a 2/1. At the beginning of your second main phase, if an opponent lost life this turn, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. Until end of turn, you may play that card. In any aggressive deck, this should not be hard to trigger. And then you're choosing the best of your top 2 cards every turn to draw. Like this just seems like a lot of value in a 2 drop. Am I
Yeah,
off
no,
base here?
I think you're right. I think it's like it is very good. It is definitely very good. There's so many ways to just chip in for damage, even if you're not getting combat triggers. And then it just gives you until end of turn is, I'd say about half as good as until end of next turn. But everything in this deck's probably going to be, 1, 2, or 3 mana anyways. So might as well, right? I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think card's sweet. I also really like Gev Scaled Scorch, one of my favorite cards from the set. It's a red and a black for a Lizard Mercenary. It's a 3/2. It has Ward. You have to pay 2 life to target this with a spell. Other creatures you control enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. Whenever you cast a lizard spell, Gev deals 1 damage to target opponent. So this is a 2 mana 3/2 with Ward. So that costs 2 life. So that's very aggressive. It's like a Blood Tithe Harvester that just gets in there. And one of the things about Harvester is sometimes you just play that and it beats down really quickly and you win.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like, oh, it's Harvester. I can ignore it. Wait, I'm at 14 after 2 turns. Wait,
Mm-hmm.
it moves quick.
And then you have to pay life to remove this, which makes it extra aggressive. If you're playing other lizards, it's pinging every time you do that. And if you're not playing other lizards, or if you are, you're still getting that +1/+1 counter when you're playing a creature if your opponent's lost some life this turn in your aggressive deck, which again shouldn't be super hard to trigger. So it's making all your little guys that you're playing in your aggressive deck into meaningfully bigger guys. This card seems like really good to me.
Yeah, it is really good, and I actually I kind of push back a little bit on a lot of like the legendary things that Wizards puts on cards. I think this card is really balanced around being legendary. Just
Agreed.
having two of these on the battlefield sounds like game over. So I really like that it's legendary. I think that holds it back a little bit, but I definitely think if you're playing aggro, if you're playing chip damage, if you're playing lizards, then this is maybe the best card in your deck.
Yeah, 100%. Next up is Plume Creed Escort. So this is 1 and a blue for a Bird Scout. It's a 2/1 with flash and flying, and when it enters, target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. So this is very reminiscent of the card Rattle Chains, except it doesn't give all your spirits flash, and it doesn't only give spirits hexproof.
Yeah.
And I only bring this up because I am currently focused on 2 mana instant speed spells in Pioneer because it's such a turn 3 format that if you're on the draw, you need. I kind of feel like you can't play a threat on turn 2. You have to pass with your mana up, and you have to be playing a deck with a turn 2 answer to whatever their turn 3. I'm essentially trying to win the game right now. Play is whether that's Sorin into Vein Ripper or Amalia combo, whatever. Um, so in that play style, I think having threats you can play if they don't do the thing that you need to counter is super important. So I just like this as if there's going to be like a flash deck anywhere. This is just like a generic card. It might be like the last card cut every time from that deck because it's not like amazing, but it has a lot of versatility. And it kind of fits a playstyle that I think is undervalued right now in Pioneer and
Yeah.
Explorer.
In standard, I have an Azorius like blink flash flying deck, and this is like exactly what the doctor ordered for it. Protect your forget the guy's name. The Oh my gosh, Malcolm. It's a similar thing. It has the same body, I think, as the I'm blanking on every single card name. The Fairy Mastermind, whatever the world champion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's what the card. Yeah, so same body, and it doesn't do the card draw thing, but it can also protect your Fairy Mastermind. So I like it.
Yeah, neat little card. So the next card is Tender Wild Guide. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2 for a Possum Druid with Offspring 2. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. Tap, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So this is a bit of a weird one because I don't think anyone's talking about this card because 2 mana Mana Dorks are bad unless they have hexproof. It's basically
Yeah.
the story there. This one's interesting though because it is powerful to go from 2 mana to 4 mana. Like if they don't remove this, you're ahead. If they do remove it, they just killed your 2 drop, which is like a fair exchange of resources.
Be expected. Yeah.
And what I like about this is mana dorks are also bad because they don't do anything once you've made the jump from 1 to 3 with your Llanowar Elf or 2 to 4 with your Sylvan Caryatid. It's like the values diminish late game.
Yeah.
But this accrues value for no additional mana if it just sits there, like every turn. You can leave this back as a blocker. It gets bigger. It can block, tap, grow, eat a thing.
Yeah.
Like this, if you're not using the mana, this will grow quickly. If you are using the mana, that's awesome. And as a late game draw, like again, this is a 4 mana 2/2 and a 1/1 that both tap for 1 mana and both grow every turn. Like this is actually, I think, a really good card if there's a deck that wants to jump from 2 mana to 4 mana.
Yeah, I really like this card. It kind of appeals to a lot of things I like in Magic of like accruing value and like ramping up. And the only problem is it's in green. That's it. You know.
Look, it's got to be good eventually. You know how I know this card is busted? It's because they didn't give it to like one of the 10 type groups. Because I think it would have
It's
been
a
too good.
awesome
It's a
druid.
possum. They were like, we can't make it a frog or it's too good. We have to
But if it
leave
said
it
Ward 2 instead
homeless.
of Offspring 2, is it just so much better?
I don't know. It's a 2 mana. I kind of feel like 2 mana creatures can just die to removal
Okay.
because the removal is going to cost 1 or 2 mana, so that's fine. Um,
Okay.
and I think just like a mana dork that is a decent mana sink itself late game to make 2 of these. If you top deck it in like a grindy game,
Yeah.
oh no, I like
No,
it. I like it a
I
lot.
like I like the card too. I was just wondering. I just feel like it's not gonna really stick. Like I like it a lot personally, but I just doesn't seem.
I don't think the standard metagame is going to revolve around Tender Wild Guide, but um, again, we're talking about like budget mid range decks. I think
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is a great
No,
card
I agree.
to put in there. Another sweet card is Vine Reap Mentor. So this is the Golgari signpost. It's black and a green for a squirrel druid. It's a 3/2, so kind of that Blood Tithe Harvester vibe we were talking about. When it enters or dies, create a food token. That's simple. Again, I don't think this is a meta breaking card, but I think this is a really sweet include for a squirrel deck or a deck that cares about food. It's just very efficient. It's a 2 mana 3/2, which is good, and it gives you value coming and going. Lots of game pieces
Yeah,
lying around. This card's just awesome.
yeah. It's 3 pieces of cardboard for 2 mana. What else could you ask for?
Exactly. Exactly. Finch Formation is a card I just wanted to call out for limited specifically. So this is a common. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flyer. When this creature enters, target creature you control gains flying until end of turn. And it has Offspring 3. And I just really like this as like a Windrake variant that can be a 6 drop that should win you a lot of grindy board stall games, which is a lot to get from a 3 drop common. Because you're getting 3 flying power across 2 bodies and jumping 2 of your creatures the turn you play it. So if you have, it's like one of those board stalls where you have like a 3/3 and a 4/4 sitting around, but they have a 3/3 and a 4/4 sitting around. You give yours flying, and even if that doesn't win the game on the spot, you have these guys back as blockers. So if they attack, you just chump with the Finch and the Offspring, and then can attack again. Like this feels like a card that's going to be sweeter than usual for a Windrake variant in limited.
Yeah, I think it's kind of busted and limited for sure.
Okay, so next up is Mind Whisker, which This is the card I was talking about, the uncommon build around that I'm excited to get to.
Okay.
So this is 2 and a blue for a rat wizard. It's a 3/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1. And then it has threshold. As long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, creatures your opponents control get -1, -0. So again, this is just a sweet deck. It is not a broken deck. But it's not hard to get 7 cards in your graveyard, especially if you're surveilling every turn.
Yeah, that was
And
the cutoff for uh, search press counter, right? That seemed to flip all the time.
yeah, yeah. That might have been 6. I don't know. Maybe it was 7.
I'll research it. Go for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, it's not hard to fill up your graveyard, and this is not a legendary creature. You can have multiples of these through clone effects, through playing 2 copies, because you have 4 in your deck. Creatures your opponents control getting -1, -0 is interesting, because if that's turned on, then this is kind of like a 3/3, not a 3/2. Um, but also like potentially bigger because then double blocking, it's like it gets extra toughness. It's a whole thing. But if you get multiples of these out, it's hard for your opponents to meaningfully have a board of creatures that have 1 power less than usual, 2 power less than usual, 3 power. Like this can completely lock down um, a game state, but it doesn't have to, because I think surveilling on your upkeep is also a really nice value in any kind of grindy, mid-rangey, graveyard-centered deck that this would go in. So it's not super duper common to find an uncommon quote unquote build around for like a kitchen table deck to play with your friends. But this one struck my fancy as like this is a sweet card that it would be fun to go out and make a deck around.
Yeah, you sold me on it. Escanta is 7, by the way, for the record. Mind Whisker, I looked at it. I didn't see anything. You told me it was amazing. I didn't see anything. You told me it was fun. I didn't see anything. But then you said place 4 of them and also put clone effects in. There's like a cool, I don't know if you have it. And there's like a mockingbird here that you can do, like basically copy it with, but make it a flyer. And the idea of like your opponent having a board of 7 creatures and all of them having 0 power is just really appealing to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's
so
sweet. It's just
that's pretty funny.
this
Yeah.
is like Marge Simpson and the potato meme. Like I just think it's neat. Like I just like the card.
I would
Um,
love it if it was creatures your opponent's control get -1, -1. That would actually kind of like, I would be all about it then.
I think that would be problematic.
I would be all about it. That's all I'm saying.
All right, next up we have Zoraline Cosmos Caller. So this is a 1 white and black. So it's a 3-drop for a flying vigilance 3/3 bat cleric. Whenever a bat you control attacks, you gain 1 life. When this card enters or attacks, you may pay white and a black and 2 life. When you do, return target non-land permanent card, mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. I don't think there's too much to say about this card. It just seems like it has a bunch of text. It's a 3 mana 3/3 flying vigilance creature. It's going to gain you some life, and if this is coming down later in the game, it has a powerful ETB ability. If it comes into play on turn 3 and then survives for future turns, it has a powerful attack ability. This attacks very easily as a vigilant flying creature. There's just a lot of value going on with this card.
Yeah, so walk me through this. If you have Zoraline and the Essence Channeler on the battlefield, I feel like they synergize like back and forth like crazy. 'Cause you're gonna get, first of all, it's flying vigilance 3/3, so you're gonna attack with it every turn. You're gonna get a trigger basically every turn. You can, you know, so if it enters, you can pay that and 2 life, and then you can trigger the life lost for the Essence Channeler
Yep,
and give it flying and vigilance. So you can attack and then give it flying and vigilance. The vigilance won't matter, but the flying will.
yep,
And then it's whenever a bat you control attacks, you can get multiple triggers from multiple bats, right?
yep. 2 counters
Um,
on your Essence Channeler, give it
yeah,
flying.
and then like someone kills your essence channeler, you get a bunch of tokens on it. You might even kill it yourself because, like, holy cow, you can basically get it back for free, and for its own cost, and get more counters. Like, the bats seem really cool to me. I'm really hoping that like open a few more of them because it doesn't seem like the best strategy, but it seems so much fun to me.
Yeah,
Lots of nickeling, diming life, and I
yep,
like it.
100%. I think it's awesome. Next up, we have Sunspine Lynx, which has been talked about a lot, so we'll be brief, but it's 2 red red for a 5/4 elemental cat. Players can't gain life, damage can't be prevented, and when it enters, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non basic lands that player controls. I just want to shout this out specifically for a really sweet, like, mono red taxes deck I've been playing in Explorer, which just plays like every card that punishes your opponent for doing anything that's ever been printed. It has like a playset of Eidolon of the Great Revel, of Magebane Lizard, of Rampaging Ferocidon, and it just chips away at their life so effectively with that, plus Inti and Smuggler's Copter, some Voldaren Thrill Seekers, and then a bunch of sweet removal spells. This is just going in that deck, and I'm really excited. I think this is a generically great card anyway, but it's perfect. Oh, Furnace Punisher, 4 of a Furnace Punisher in that deck, to punish them for paying non-basic lands, which this also does. So I'm just excited to put 2 of these as the top end of that deck, which I've been smashing with in the current Explorer metagame. So I'm excited for this card for my personal pet deck at the moment.
Yeah, I kind of I think I would like it a lot if it hadn't received a lot of hype already. I think the hype has gotten like I even hear it in my small corner of the world, and I don't think it's that good. I think it suffers from not really having. You're talking about like a red taxes deck. Like that seems like a cool home for it, but like most red decks aren't curving out to 4 to play a creature. Like I don't know. I like it. I like it. We'll see what comes of it.
Speaking of curving out to 4, we've got some rats coming up. Vren the
All
Relentless,
right.
2 blue and a black for a 3/4 rat rogue. It has Ward 2. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. Very nice line of text. At the beginning of each end step, create X 1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature gets +1/+1 for each other rat you control, where X is the number of creatures your opponents controlled that were exiled this turn. Um, I love this card. I don't know if it just suffers from the black 4-drop problem where, like, why wouldn't you just play Shieldred? But this card, having Ward 2, I love that on 4 drops because, again, they're going to be paying 1 or 2 mana for the spell to remove this. So if they have to pay an additional 2, you play this for 4 mana, they remove it for 3 mana. Like, okay, they're a little ahead, but you don't lose the game off that exchange. Or they remove it for 4 or 5 mana, which is also totally fine. It hates on graveyard synergy decks with that if a creature would die, exile instead clause. And,
Also, like
like,
so many death triggers.
yep, gets rid of them all for your opponents only, right? It's one-sided.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of each end step, yours and your opponent's, if a creature your opponent controlled died, you get like a relentless rat, which is very strong. Like this is a 3/4, and if you get 2 of these rat tokens from this card, like how do you not win the game?
Yeah.
um, and it can do more than that. So you're playing this in your blue black mid range deck with a bunch of removal spells. I don't even think you need to play any other rats for this to just be bananas.
No, absolutely not. I think this is really good, especially in mid range. I think this is just the worst card ever against a control deck. They're just gonna say, "Oh, because you're gonna have a bunch of creature removal in your deck if you're playing this, right? You're gonna have all sorts of creature removal, and it's a 4 mana 3/4. Like,
Yeah.
you're just gonna lose everything to control because all your creature removal will be useless, and this 4 mana 3/4 with essentially no upside. It had Ward 2. That's the only relevant text against control. Which they're going to be like, yeah, sure, dude. Sunfall, thanks for the token. All
Yeah, that's
right.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Potentially an even sweeter rat, thinking about just the commander format. Wick the World Mind. 3 and a black, so 4 mana for a 2/4 rat warlock. Whenever Wick or another rat you control enters, create a 1/1 black snail creature token. If you don't control a snail, otherwise put a +1/+1 counter on a snail you control. So it's kind of like amass snails whenever Wick or a rat enters the battlefield. And then for blue, black, and red, 3 Grixis mana, sacrifice a snail. Wick deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to each opponent. Then draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. This is the first legendary creature I've seen in a long time that just is like calling my name as a commander deck commander. They've printed so many powerful legendaries of late that are just like walls of text that when you think about what it would be like to play the card in a game, even if it's cool, it's like I don't want to do that much work when I'm playing Magic. All the like when you make a token, make a copy of that token stuff, or the offspring deck they just put out that like the commander gives all your creatures offspring too. So like anytime you play a creature, you pay 2 mana to get a 1/1 copy of that creature. Like I don't know, that just seems miserable to do in paper. Not Wick, baby. This is just making a snail. It ticks up like a time bomb. You can sack it to draw a bunch of cards, do a bunch of damage to each opponent. It's got
Yeah.
typal synergies. You're throwing snails at people. This card is just sweet, and I get excited about ticking my snail up every time I get a rat. And I can, like, my smooth brain can handle that much game object management.
Yeah, I think this is strikes a really good balance there. It seems a lot of fun. So I hope you build it. We'll have to play it.
I have too many Grixis decks already. I can't. I can't.
Yeah. Nah, this is essentially mono black. You're fine. You're fine.
Um, Also wanted to talk about Castrol the Windcrested. Again, this is more for casual, but I think there's like this could be the top end of a blue-white flyers deck. So this is 5 mana for a 4/5 flying bird scout. Whenever one or more birds you control deal combat damage to a player, choose one. Put a bird creature card from hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Put a +1/+1 counter on each bird you control, or draw a card. So it's tough for 5-minute creatures to cut it, but if you're playing a bird deck, you get value from this the turn that you play it, right? Because you play it and then attack with a bird that has flying, so hopefully you're connecting. So if you play this on turn 5 and then immediately get to put a bird from your hand or graveyard into play, maybe that's a 2 mana bird, a 3 mana bird, like you're getting a lot of value. Like it's a lot of mana value you're getting, that's a lot of card advantage you're getting. Being able to potentially pump your team with counters or draw a card. Again, the turn you play it and then each subsequent turn is what makes this card appealing. And it's a 4/5 flyer. So I think that this will not be competitive, but it is actually quite strong, and I haven't seen much chatter about this card.
Yeah. I mean, it has. I mean, it has a few more pitfalls. Like even birds, like they don't really curve up to 5. Most of the stuff is low to the ground. It's very much like if you're connecting with birds, then you're probably playing tempo. And um, I don't. This is just going to design point. Like I like that they have some sort of drawback, but why is something coming from your hand the battlefield with a finality counter? Like I don't like that. I like it returning from the graveyard, but I don't like. I don't know. That just seems weird to me.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some very good reason for it that escapes our narrow minds,
Yeah,
but
I think you got to just run a bunch of what all the like the Maskwood Nexus effects and build a commander deck and have some birds and then Atrax is very bird-like, really,
true.
when you think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
It's
can't.
very bird adjacent. I don't think you're breaking out from it, but yeah, I think this card's pretty sweet. I think that if you're playing a 5 mana bird, then you've already thrown tier 1 out the window, so you can definitely have fun with it.
Indeed. 'Cause that is allegedly what Magic's about, right?
No, not really.
All right, the last creature we have to talk about is Eddie Merc Crab. So this is 5 and 2 blue, 7 mana for a 5/5 elemental crab with flash. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. It enters tapped if it's not your turn, and when it enters, tap up to 2 target creatures. So this just seems awesome in any kind of blue-based, flashy spellslinger counter your stuff deck. It's not going to be hard to get this to cost 2 or 3 mana for a 5/5 with flash. It can't flash and block, but it can flash and tap 2 creatures to essentially fog an attack or open the way for you to crack back with your 5/5 when you untap with it. You can also play it on your turn untapped if you want it to be there blocking. It's just they've made a lot of cards recently that are like big blue creatures that cost very little if you have a lot of instants and sorceries in your graveyard.
Yeah.
This having flash seems like by far the best one of them. So I think this card's really
Well,
sweet.
compare it to Tolarian Terror real quick, because that actually gets a lot of play in like a mono blue deck. What would you, how would you compare this to Tolarian Terror?
I'd play this over Terror every time.
Hmm.
And I mean, you don't have to choose. You get both. I'd play this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's certain like you don't want to have too much creature in your spell slinger deck.
I mean, those are the 8 I'd
Sure, I think
play.
the ward two kind of hurts. The ward two is
No, 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 it
kind of
does,
painful.
but this has flash, which gets around a lot of, your sorcery
Yeah, you
speed
can hold up.
removal
You can hold up
anyway.
protection and stuff.
So yeah, I like this
Um,
card a lot, and it goes in that style of deck, and there's got to
yeah,
be a sweet way to build it.
yeah.
Um,
It's an interesting comparison.
yeah, and I'm gonna jump ahead on our list of spells straight to Spellgyre, another sweet uncommon. It's 2 and 2 blue, so 4 mana instant. Choose one, counter target spell, or surveil 2, then draw 2 cards. Um, this is just a beautiful spell. Like in a deck where you want to be holding up mana to counter things, you want to have things to do if they don't play something you want to counter. This card is both of those things. Yes, 4 mana for a counter spell is not good. 4 mana for surveil 2, then draw 2 cards isn't bad, but being stapled on one card to advance your plan of either counter their game winning play or get yourself ahead by surveilling 2, then drawing 2 cards, depending on how it shakes out, is just it's a beautiful card. That's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, this is we've seen a lot of variations of this, but just adding like the 4 mana draw two into the counter spell, I think this is pretty good card.
Yeah, I'm playing it in my Eddie Merc Crab deck. That's where it's going.
Aha!
Um, no doubt in my mind. Maybe the other card that we have yet to talk about that I'm highest about is called
Okay.
Blooming Blast. So it's 1 and a red for an instant. It has Gift a Treasure. Blooming Blast deals 2 damage to target creature. If the gift was promised, Blooming Blast also deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. So this is very reminiscent of a card called Searing Blood, which costs 2 red, and it dealt 2 damage to a creature, and if that creature died, it dealt 3 damage to that creature's controller. So that's a pretty good card. Like, it's almost playable in Explorer and Pioneer. It's seen some play in like really aggressive red decks. Because it does double duty, removing creatures and going to face. Um, I think this card is so much better than Searing Blood that it's almost hard to wrap your mind around. Because I don't think gifting a treasure is that big of a deal. Um, and you don't. The problem with Searing Blood was A, it costs 2 red, which this doesn't. And
Yeah, it's
B, in
painful.
order to get the 3 damage to their face, it had to kill the creature. This can do that, but it can also just do the 3 to the face, right? Like, you don't. It's not gated around finding the right opportunity to sling it out there and get okay, you blocked my creature, now I can Searing Blood to finish it off and do 3 damage to you. Like, this can just go 3 to face if you give them a treasure, essentially. Um, so I don't know. I think this card, if there's any kind of aggressive red deck, I think it wants this card.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great against like low to the ground. If you're an aggro deck and they're an aggro deck and you're playing this, then it's super good. It's an instant. I think Gift of Treasure is kind of a lot. Like it doesn't seem like much, but if you're using it to like have a blowout, where you're basically just killing the creature and getting a lightning strike to their face, then it's definitely worth the gift.
Right. Which and the thing about the gift is
Yeah.
like if you don't need the 3 damage to their face, you don't have to give
Yeah,
them a
yeah,
gift.
yeah. I mean, we've
So
seen 2 mana, 2 damage be playable, right, with upside. So
yeah, yeah. So I like this card a lot. Um, the next card is Cash Grab. Great name. One and a green for an instant. Mill 4 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you control a squirrel or returned a squirrel card to your hand this way, create a food token. So this is obviously a great squirrel enabler. This card is on the list because of how much it resembles Malevolent Rumblings from Modern Horizons 3, which has been kind of emerging as a really, really good card. So that also costs 2. It costs the same mana. That's a sorcery. They both mill 4 cards, and you get a permanent card back to your hand. That then
Mhm.
made an Eldrazi Scion token, which can tap for mana. So you got a mana back, which makes it excellent. A food token is much worse than that. Um, and getting the food token in the first place is dependent on the squirrel contingency. But the actual effect, especially being able to do it at instant speed, of milling 4 cards, if you're playing anything graveyard synergy, you're putting 4 cards in the graveyard and then returning a permanent card from among those cards to your hand. It's a quite powerful effect, actually, as we've seen from Malevolent Rumbling. So this is worse than Rumbling, but Rumbling isn't in a lot of formats, and this is pretty good.
Yeah, no, I like this. It's kind of like an impulse for green in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, with upside for squirrels and
Yeah,
upside
with
for
upside.
graveyard synergy. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. Next up, we have Parting Gust. So this is 2 white mana for an instant. You can gift a tapped fish. And it says exile target non-token creature. If the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. So basically, you can either blink a thing or give your opponent a tapped fish to exile something forever.
Yeah, I this is my favorite card that I've actually played this quite a bit because I have I think we talked about this in an earlier podcast. I have a like an Orzhov scam life gain deck,
Yeah, like the
and it was
prototype stuff.
yeah, you use prototype and lifelink, so you have like uh the steel steel
Steel Seraph
Seraph, Steel
and
Seraph, and the Phyrexian Flesh Gorger, and you like to blink those. They say, "Oh shoot, we have to kill them. Let's throw a removal spell." And you say, "Actually, I have a 8/6 with Ward 8 with Vigil, Menace, and Lifelink." And they say, "Oh shoot, I just lost the game." And I paid 3 life and a card to do it. So this is super good in that, and it's also I had been playing. I forget the card's name. I'm just blanking everything tonight. It's an enchantment, Magawa, but it's basically does this, but you channel to blink it
Touch the Spirit
and
Realm.
touch the spirit realm. Yes, love that card. And you can, but the removal side is a little more flexible, but it costs 3 mana and it's sorcery speed. This is actually just straight up a good removal spell.
Yeah,
A tapped fish is like one of the least. Like you're not worried about a tapped fish. If you lose the tapped fish, then you know
right.
that's the game. But like
Like
of all the gifts, this is yeah,
Beast Within has been a good card, and that gave them a 3/3. And granted, it hit any permanent, but it costs
right.
3 mana and gave them a 3/3. This costs 2 mana and gives them a 1/1.
So the downside is it has to be a non-token creature, otherwise you wouldn't have to give a fish. It's kind of like a little built-in correction to the card, and it's 2 white mana. So that's a little hefty, but I think there's so many like 2 mana. Like compare this to Bovine Intervention and even Get Lost. Like there's times where you'd rather have this. If you're playing like a mid-range deck with white, I kind of like this as your removal instead of Get Lost because the tokens, like the map tokens, are kind of annoyingly powerful to give them. And then if they target your Ibiza, or really so many creatures have ETBs, you just say, actually, we're going to go even on mana instead of me going down, and I'm going to get my ETB again. Uh, it's it's a good card. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Another good card is Wear Down. So this is 1 and a green for a sorcery. It has gift a card. Destroy a target artifact or enchantment. If the gift was promised, instead destroy 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. So this is my pick for favorite commander card from the set. Because this is 2 mana, destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments at the table, and give anyone a card. You don't have to give it to the person that you're destroying their artifact or enchantment. So it's a little political. It does just naturalize something at sorcery speed if you don't want to give anyone a card, but you can give the player that you like or is helping you, or you're not worried about a card for 2 mana to destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments, which in Commander, there are always artifacts and enchantments lying around, and they're always powerful, and you always want to get rid of them. And this is just a great way to do it.
Yeah, I think this is really hard to main deck this kind of effect in constructed, but Commander, this is just like you said, it gets so good in Commander.
Yeah, love it. Our next card is Consumed by Greed. It's 1 and 2 black, so 3 mana instant. Gift a card. Target opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. If the gift was promised, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Um, no one's been talking about this card from what I've seen. I think this might be like one of the most constructed playable cards from this set, depending on how the meta shakes out and if people are playing big scary creatures that you want to remove. But like this type of effect has been really good in certain instances, like the current Pioneer metagame. A lot of people are playing Blot Out in their sideboards to deal with vampires because they just cheat like a Vein Ripper into play, and then you can just pay 3 mana to make them exile their own Vein Ripper because it's their biggest creature. This kind of plays the same way, but it also comes with the upside in a grinding matchup. Like giving them a card is a fairly steep price, but you're only going to do it if you're getting a great card back as well.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that like it's either a totally fine removal spell, assuming the format shakes out in a way where people are playing big creatures. If it doesn't, then no one's going to play a 3 mana removal spell that only deals with big creatures. But if you have Shieldred in your graveyard and you
Yeah.
want it
I was
back
just
to win the
thinking.
game, you get it and they draw a card. It might be a Shieldred for them, which would be bad, but
Yeah.
you got one too. So like in the situations where you know you're getting a great card and they might get a great card, it's like always a great trade to make.
Yeah, this is one of those very rare I'll take the vote, you take the mystery box situations.
Exactly, exactly. I love that framing. So
I love this art, by the way. I like the title, and this art is fantastic. I think it's just love it.
yeah, I think this is a really good card. And even if it's not being played at the top tables of the Pro Tour, play it in your decks on Arena where you don't want to use your rare wild cards because it will be sweet. Next up, we have an artifact, Patchwork Banner. So this is 3 mana for an artifact. When it enters, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. I'm just calling this out as one of those uncommons that will always be a $2 or $3 card because of Commander. Um, I think a lot of type decks are going to want this. Your allies decks, your rat decks, your ninja decks, your humans decks. It's a 3 mana rock, which isn't super played in like super very tuned Commander, but a lot of Commander is not super duper tuned, and this is just a great include as a mana rock in any deck that cares about typal synergies.
Yeah, if you're running a go wide tribal deck, sorry, typal deck, this is going to be something that goes in there. Just shove it in.
Yeah, it's incredibly accessible and versatile for that type of deck, being colorless too. I did want to talk about an enchantment for a second. Kidnap. So this is 2 and 2 blue. So 4 mana enchantment aura has gift a card, enchant creature. When it enters, tap enchanted creature. If the gift wasn't promised, put 3 stun counters on it. You control enchanted creature. So it's a little hard to parse out, but basically, 4 mana gain control of a creature, um, and you gain control of it tapped, and then you either put 3 stun counters on it, so you steal their creature for 4 mana, and you don't get to really use it for a couple of turns, or you give them a card and it doesn't come in with the stun counters on it, so you just tap it and you get to use it when you untap. Um, that's just sweet, you know. Like again, I think that's a cool card to include in your kitchen table decks that are mid-rangey and grindy, where it's super fun to not only remove their Shieldred, but then get their Shieldred.
Yeah, this effect is normally like 5 mana, I think, and then it has like a little upside downside with the rest of the card. But we're slowly getting towards where blue actually has removal. Just a couple more years, and we'll have this for 2 mana, and blue will have its own Doomblade finally.
I'm not sure I want to
I
live in a
like it.
world where you get control magic for 2 mana.
Oh, just give it a couple years. That's all I'm saying. Also, why is that a raccoon? Is a raccoon's kit? Why would it not be like a kitten or something in the art? I don't know.
So I don't think it's a kitten reference. So I know like otter
What is, yeah,
aren't
what, oh, am I
otter
missing
babies are
something?
called kits, right? So I would assume that raccoons must also be kits. Maybe it's a generic term for like a woodland creature baby. Um, I know that from the Redwall books that they.
Baby raccoons are usually called kits. All right, we all learned something today.
Well, I kind of already
Um,
knew that as I demonstrated. So
well, you said you didn't say raccoons. You said maybe. Well, now we know.
now we know.
All right, it makes sense. It makes sense.
There you go.
I guess that's where kitten comes from. I don't know.
Potentially.
We're in a world here. All right, the art is great. Then
No notes. No
take it.
notes.
Yeah.
So next up, we have some lands to talk about. We have Fountain Port, which is untyped land. It taps for colorless. You can pay 2 and tap it to sacrifice a token and draw a card. 3 and tap it, pay 1 life, create a blue 1/1 fish creature token. Pay 4 and tap it, create a treasure token. What do you think about Fountain Port?
I love it. I actually got one in a pack and I threw it in there. I really thought it would be Murex Light. I thought it would just kind of be like a different flavor of Murex, where you're essentially just paying 3 mana to create a 1/1 token. The downside here would be that you pay 1 life, and then the upside is that, hey, you can actually use that as a chump blocker. So if you're actually blocking something, it's actually you're going up in life overall. I was like, oh, 4 mana, create a treasure. Who's going to do that? 2 mana, sacrifice a token. So I guess you can have this really convoluted loop where you're either paying like 7 mana to draw a card or lose a life. But then I played it in a game, and I realized how many tokens exist without you having to do anything. Like we talked about all the gifting random stuff. We have all these like you don't even have to have token synergies in your deck. Your opponent will give you tokens with Get Lost and all just they just fly around like willy-nilly. They're all over the battlefield. And paying 3 mana to sack one of those and draw a card is essentially like a 3 mana draw to spell that you're playing out of your hand. You're the same card advantage. Um, so I played it with I absolutely love it with uh, the Forge, Urabrask's Forge,
Oh
because you're
yeah,
just
that's
getting a
sweet.
token every turn,
Ooh, I
and then you
love
just
that.
like, yeah, it's just insane. I played it with like Elspeth, the one that's still around that makes a 1 mana 1/1, and sure, it just makes a 1/1. There's just so many tokens that you get incidentally that this is it's better than Mirex by a landslide. And as soon as I played it in a game, and I was just like, "Holy cow! I'm drawing an extra card every turn in this like long matchup, and I'm just outvaluing the other mid-range decks so easily." I was like, "Okay, I got to craft another one and stick it in there." So I think this should go in anything that's going any mid-range, any control. you're gonna want to have this card as like probably a three of, unless you have insane mana demands. So
Yeah,
really love it.
I haven't been that high on this card just reading it, but it was sticking in my mind as one of those like, it does a lot for just a land that comes into
Yeah,
play untapped.
everything seems kind of like and then to sacrifice a token, draw a card is like, well, you have to, you just read the other modes and you assume you have to do those to get those tokens. There are so many tokens. It's just
Yeah. No, I believe
make
you.
my
And
eyes open. Yeah.
Urbrass Forge, you have lit something deep inside of me that I'm not going to be able to rest until I play that deck.
Yeah.
All right, and then
That's
lastly
insane.
we have Lupin Flower Village, and this is really a cycle of lands. I wanted to call out this one specifically, but this is a cycle of uncommon lands. They tap for colorless or one color to spend the mana only to cast creature spells. So Lupin Flower Village is the white one in this cycle, and then on top of that, you can pay one in a white, tap it, and sacrifice it to look at the top six cards of your library. Reveal a bat, bird, mouse, or rabbit. Put it in your hand. Rest on the bottom in any order. Or random order, sorry. So the thing with this is like there's just so little opportunity cost to playing this in a white creature deck that has bats, birds, mice, or rabbits in it. And like 2 mana to basically look six deep and draw a relevant creature spell as a late game option from your lands is just really good. And it's a land. It doesn't have to do that much to be really worth a spot in your deck. So I think this card, but I mean most of the cards in this cycle seem really sweet to me. I would want one or two in a lot of decks if I'm playing creatures.
Yeah, I agree, but definitely see the appeal. It's kind of like if you're at the part of the game where you're sacking a land to try and rummage for a creature, then like maybe you've already lost the game. Like, because you're not really gonna have the mana to play the card, and with these archetypes, it's very much like you need to win the game early. I don't know. It's definitely like you can play it in these decks, but my initial thought was like, wow, this is insane value, and then it's like, well, you need I would put a couple of these if I was playing one of these type of decks for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's all it needs to do
Yeah,
to be worth a
yeah,
look.
it's worth your consideration.
Like I think it'll be a long time before we build a deck without having to think about these cards. You know what I mean? Like should I put one or two of these in my deck?
When you realize like, oh, actually, this is a mouse. I could.
Might as
These are
well
kind
throw a
of
loop in Flower
yeah,
Village in.
yeah. Huh.
All right. Well, we got through the 35 cards we pulled out. If you're looking at your screen, you'll see the MTG Goldfish prices for these cards. The cards I really like, I put a 2 next to, which also doubled the price shown next to them because it thinks I'm talking about two cards. And these cards are not expensive. Like, and that's something else that we should talk about before we sign off with Bloomburrow is there are no expensive cards in this set. And I don't mean literally zero, but almost literally zero. Um,
What do you know what the most expensive card is?
We can look it up. I want to say it's Maha,
Yeah.
it's Feathers Knight, which is a very good card. I think we'll see a lot of that card for a long time. Um, but even that's like pre-ordering like $15 maybe, which is wild, is like the pinnacle. People have been complaining about Box EV. Like I opened a box and got $40 worth of cards out of it. Because everything is just really cheap for some reason that I can't quite make out, which is A, great for us. B, a little concerning because if one of these cards does pop off and become like a multi-format all-star, then it's going to absorb that missing EV in the box and become a $40 mythic or $30 rare kind of card. Potentially, because there's that space for demand to drive it there in the EV of the box. But I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this set being so cheap so early. Like we talk about pre-release prices, these are pre-release prices. Like all these rares we were
Yeah.
talking about, being excited about. Sunspine Lynx, which has been a really hyped card, is like less than $2.
Yeah, but you're not
Essence
going to play in your
Chandler is
commander
a
deck. That's all.
dollar.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like it's a
Yeah,
little wild.
I almost, when we were talking about Fountain Point, I was almost like, get your copies now for less than $2 because you're going to want to put this in every deck that you play, like every commander deck, every deck period.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, again, not in the
so
financial
weird.
advice business, but I don't think that's a bad idea. I might order a couple right after this episode. Like, um, yeah, I don't know what's going on with this value for this set. But
Well, we saw
it's
like
worth
two
noting.
like huge discrepancies. We went from Murders of Carlos Manor, where like the biggest card was like the Old God for like $30 in pre-release. And then last set, like every single card was, $30, $40 that had a, mythic icon on it. But I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's just really
Maybe
fascinating.
Magic's dead. That's got to be it.
I don't think that's it, but
Yeah, that's
might have
probably it.
something to do with wallet fatigue from
Yeah, Modern Horizons
Assassin's
3.
Creed and Modern
Yeah,
Horizons
Assassin's Creed.
3. But I don't know what to make. I think there's some really good cards in this set, and they just don't cost a lot, so buy them.
Yeah, I see Three Tree City is $24.
Yeah, which
Um,
also I don't think it should be. So I think that price is coming down. So
yeah.
if uh,
Oh,
not,
welcome back, Fabled Passage. By the way, that's one of
oh
my
yeah,
favorite rare lands. I have already have four of them, so
love
very
that.
very happy with welcoming that back to the format.
Indeed,
Just deceptively good rare land for all sorts of purposes.
indeed. I have four copies as well in Arena, but annoyingly, three of them are like from one
Are they
printing
different?
and one's from
Oh,
another, and
gross.
it's just like I can't make myself craft another one, but it's just so aggravating.
Very gross. Yeah,
Anyway,
don't craft another.
I won't craft another one. And on that note, I think we're gonna wrap up Bloomburrow. We're gonna be back for kind of our now Bloomburrow's been out for a little while. What do we think? Types episode. I think we're gonna change up the format a little bit and talk a little bit more about specific things that we like playing or cool budget decks that we are going to propose, rather than just talking about the format and the cards being played big picture. So stay tuned for that. And otherwise, have fun out there. This set looks sweet, so go out and put it through its paces. And that does it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like the video. And please reach out to me with any questions, either in the comments or on Twitter at Monetary Mentor. I look forward to hearing from you, and until then, be kind to yourself and have fun out there.